feel about it?
And you touched on a lot right there, right? So one thing that I wanna touch on, and it hit social media tough, really hard, and it was one of them things like you just said. You earned your stripes in this business, and at this point you can say things unapologetically and whatever, but you're gonna put the word out how it needs to be put out. And recently during Super Bowl, I forgot what it was, but had Roger Goodell there, and you got up and you had some real words for him, just as far as as the NFL, we talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion, we talk about X, Y, and Z, but the numbers don't show. Just speak on that, and obviously, you said it. At this point, this is like your calling as far as being able to speak for the speakers. You know what I'm saying? For the people who don't have that voice. To just speak on that a little bit, and just were you setting up for that, or was it just something that came to your heart at that moment in time?
No, it had been on my heart for a while, because here's the thing: we have seen over the last 5 years, whatever, the numbers roll back in terms of black head coaches, and for a period there, even among general managers, we had seen the numbers in terms of diversity roll back with general managers, and so. I'll never forget this. I'm in Indianapolis at the Combine one year, and I go upstairs, as you guys know, in the city center, third floor. I'm going to go get something to eat real quick. And there's like a half dozen black coaches that I know who are hanging out, sitting there talking. And I'm just going to walk by and go get my food. And they were like, Jim, come here. And they called me over and they said, you got to do something about this. And I said, about what? And they said, the lack of black coaches, head coaches. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, I'm doing all I can. What are you guys doing? You guys won't speak up on it. And then they're like, well, we can't. If we do, then we're not going to climb that ladder. We're going to be ostracized. Yeah. And I knew that to be true. And so I started thinking about it more. And one of the people who was sitting there was the late Daryl Drake, longtime wide receiver coach, Cardinals, Steelers, everywhere else. And so Daryl says to me, I'll speak on it. And he said, I'm at the end. He said, so I don't have anything to lose. I'll speak on it. And so I said, look, coach, I said, do this. Let me give you a few weeks and you think about it. And if you really want to speak on it, I said, I'll write about it. And so I gave him a few weeks and I called him and he said, yeah. He goes, I'll say something on it. And so I ended up writing a story there. And it was from that point forward that it became a big focus for me. Because here's the thing that people don't understand. They think it's just numbers, or that we're after, something that maybe we shouldn't have, or whatever their thoughts are. And they always hear this crap about you should be able to hire the best person, period, regardless of race and this, that, and the other. And I say to them, I agree with you 100% on that.
100%.
But the best people aren't being hired. And so when Brian Flores files his lawsuit, I remember I called Clarence Shellman, longtime running back coach with the Seahawks, the Cowboys, and the Chargers. And he coached Emmitt Smith. He coached LaDainian Tomlinson. He was an offensive coordinator with the Chargers 5 years when Norv Turner was there. They went to the playoffs 3 times. He didn't call plays, but he ran all the offensive meetings. He designed the run game, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, Coach, what do you think about Brian Flores' lawsuit? And he said to me, that's the reason I got out of the game. And I said, well, speak on that. And he said, Jim, he said, it is emasculating. And that's his word. He said, it is emasculating and it is devastating that you can spend all of your adult life doing everything to prepare yourself to reach the highest levels of this game. Yeah. And then when you get to that point, you are not given an opportunity to chase your dream. But yet people who are younger, who are not as qualified, or who have a certain name are given those opportunities. He said it is emasculating, it is devastating. He said ultimately what it came to was that he realized what the NFL was about. He saved his money and he left on his own terms. And he said that he could not look himself in the mirror and be part of a system that is so systemically racist. And he said he understands other coaches can't do that financially, but he was able to. And he has been out a decade Excuse me. And the thing that stuck with me is that he said, even after a decade, it still stays with you. And so when we hear the NFL talk about the importance of mental health and taking care of your mental health, I don't think they fully understand how damaging and how traumatic it is that when Blacks are being discriminated against in this hiring process, what that does to their mental health and how long that stays with them. And so again, my focus is every opportunity I get, I'm gonna shine a light on this because it's not right. And people need to understand how this is impacting these men.
Yeah.
So obviously you don't get a lot of access to Roger, but we all know that the one time that you do is at the Super Bowl. So I said, okay, when Steve and I were doing our podcast, we went to the NFL 3 different times to try and get Roger Goodell on our podcast. First time was after he did that sit down with Emmanuel Acho. And I remember watching it saying, the only person uncomfortable in this conversation is me. This black man is uncomfortable with this conversation. He's not being asked questions that he needs to be asked.
Yeah.
So we went to the NFL and asked to have him on our podcast. It goes nowhere. We get halfway through the season. We go back. We get nowhere. We do it one final time. We get nowhere. So I said, fine. We've gone through the steps of trying to have him on to have a real conversation about it. So this is my opportunity to ask him a question. And I spent a lot of time thinking about how do I want to frame it, because he's going to wiggle his way out of it. That's just the way he's prepped for that. So I'm like, okay, I know the ground rules going in, but how can I be as pointed and as direct as possible to say, I need you to really understand what I'm saying here. And so I said, okay, when I read the league's initial response to Brian Flores' lawsuit, and they said diversity, equity, and inclusion are core principles in the NFL, and I said, that's my opening, because that is straight up bullshit.
Right.
I mean, it's bullshit because the numbers don't reflect it. And so I wanted to say to him, if that is what the league is saying, let's provide some context before I ask you what I want to ask you about that. And so then we get into the number of black head coaches, the number of black GMs, and how in the history of this league, really, discrimination has been a problem as it relates to head coaches. Knowing that this league has been around for over 100 years, 24 of the 32 teams in the NFL, that's 3/4 of the teams, have had one black head coach or none in its history, in their histories. 13 franchises, which is nearly half of the league, have never had a black head coach. But you're going to sit here and tell me that diversity, equity, and inclusion are core principles in the NFL. So then I said, well, wait a minute. And again, this is me formulating all this in my mind. And I'm asking myself, how is he going to respond to this? And I know what he's going to say. He's going to say that's on the owners. The league doesn't do the hiring for teams. Owners do. And we know the owners aren't there to answer the question. So I said, no. I need to put this directly at his shoes then, if that's what he's going to do. So I looked at the league office. Of the top 11 executives at the NFL, only 2 blacks are among those 11. When I look at the NFL media group where I work and where we cover a player population that is between 70 and 80% black, there is not one black person at the senior management level in the newsroom who is at the table when decisions are being made about how these men are going to be covered. So while Roger can put the onus on the owners as it relates to head coaches, GMs, club presidents, the league office and the NFL media group fall under his umbrella. So now you can't sit there and say that diversity, equity, and inclusion are core principles and blame the owners for the lack of those things. And now we look at what you control and the numbers are no better. And in fact, in some cases, they are worse. That's why I just said, you know what? Ultimately, the question here then is, what do you and the owners have against hiring black people at the highest levels of the NFL in decision-making positions, period? And that's how the question came up.
No, I commend you. I commend you, man, because it was definitely something that needed to be asked to the head guy. So again, man, I commend you for that, and obviously all the great work that you do. The biggest disappointment from all of that is that I haven't heard from him.
So you would think since then, let's have a conversation.
He would have reached out to you and said, "Hey, Jim, let me expand on this." And
Haven't
none.
heard from him. Matter of fact,
Unfortunately, that's not even shocking to me because
Yeah.
I feel like we get, and obviously you've been here a lot longer than I have, and we get a lot of lip service, we get a lot of slogans, we get a lot of, and the questions you ask, and people, even the race norming thing, like we just kind of talked about that for a day, swept that under the rug, like that should have been one of the biggest issues ever to come up as far as the stain on the NFL and the shield and everything that they talk about. So it's not shocking, but I love that you definitely brought that, put his feet to the fire in a sense, and brought that question to him because people love to talk about the field and the players, and that's really the only place where you really you gotta earn your spot. There is no, like, everybody's keeping track, everybody's keeping tabs from the moment we leave high school, basically. So you can't finesse that. But as soon as you get off that field, you get to the coaches, you get to the scouts, you get to the entire ecosystem around these sports, the media spaces, the networks, they all get whiter and whiter the higher you go up. And this is across, the country. This is not even just in sports. This is corporations, period. So it definitely needs to be a fix. Part of that is, us coming together too, and, putting our money together and building our own in a sense. But while we're here continuing to build this one, we need more representation, at the highest point. So like AB said, man, appreciate the work that you're doing on the forefront of that.
No, I appreciate it. But the thing that gets me too is we have to be very careful here about that we don't fall for the old okie doke, because what we heard in that press conference too is Roger talking about that they would like to have a black owner, right? Mm-hmm. A black owner, but let's just say there's one. And as I've said, I don't just want a black owner. I want a black owner who is socially conscious and who represents the views of this community, because I don't need a guy in there or a woman in there who is on board with everything that these other owners are talking about or doing. As we like to say, all skin folk ain't kinfolk.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, I want someone in there who is speaking up on behalf of the issues that represent our community. And if we don't have that, I don't care if you have a black person in there.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. And unfortunately, the spot that we're in, if you are a black billionaire, it's most likely, you got there, a part of you getting there is, making white people feel very comfortable and being in those rooms. And it's not too many of us around here that aren't in that space, honestly.